Hey class, welcome to week 5 of Church Revitalization. This week we're going to talk about the life cycle of the church. If you'll just take a moment to get a copy of your notes, you have the PDF format, and I have mine opened up just in regular PowerPoint, but the slides are the same. As we talk about the life cycle of the church, we'll understand that many churches go through a very similar cycle. This is a pretty standard cycle that many churches go through, where we see changing in the church from dysfunction to health, and from possible decline to growth. And so looking back historically at churches and where churches are today, and how churches can see a cycle that they might be on, which is very similar to what other churches have gone through. The life cycle of the church, this is actually a little bit older material, but from Robert Dale to Dream Again, but it's kind of a standard that has been used throughout the years. Just a great foundational work on defining the life cycle of the church, and we'll see some more examples towards the end of this presentation. We'll go through these quickly, the 9 stages of the church's life cycle. The first one, obviously, when if a church is organized, church comes together, that is where the church usually begins to dream. It begins with a dream. It gives birth to an organization. The second step is the beliefs. You move from that dream to begin to define the beliefs of the church. Now, it provides a values or doctrinal agreement for organizational skills. You see those statements at the bottom there: doctrinal stance, core values, and distinctiveness. Often is developed of the founder, maybe of the pastor, the church council, whoever might be a part of organizing the church. But it also then moves from not just the founder, but defining the stance and the values, the core values, and the mission statement of the founder and the church. You then move from your beliefs to your goals. Extends the organization's shared dream and beliefs. This is where we talk about being obviously the difference between survivalistic and evangelistic. Taking risk. This is where a church, oftentimes when they begin to define their goals, they're willing to take on debt. They're willing to step out of what many people's comfort zones might be, understanding that because of their beliefs, they have goals that now have been set, and you begin to move out and develop a structure based on those goals. And that's the 4th stage. You organize the organization for pursuing its goals and advancing its dreams. So here we see form follows function. Structure is determined by the goal. The dream stands on the structure. And so really this is where you see just the life of the church begin to develop out of the beliefs and the goals. You have vision. You move from that vision to beginning to organize ministry and really just the steps that are going to be taking. And you've got to have that structure to be able to move out in that ministry, which is actually the 5th stage. 5th stage being ministry, shows the congregation reaching out to others, developing its members, and living out its dream in Christian love. See this quote here. The length of a congregation's ministry is virtually endless, but when the ministry loses its focus on extending and expanding God's kingdom, an organizational plateau occurs. So when a church is focused on ministry that is really based upon its beliefs, its goals, its structure, ministry is great. But when a church no longer thinks about its vision and its goals and how the structure feeds into that, ministry actually can just become this is the way we do it, and we continue to go through the motion, which ultimately can lead to a place where the church doesn't need to be. This is where step number 6 of the life cycle comes in. This is where nostalgia sets in. It reflects a wistful longing for a comfortable past, but the past tends to be more positive in memory than it was in reality. This is where people get that feeling of homesickness. And some of us said this is obviously where the lull is before the storm. This is kind of a humorous Will Rogers quote, but it really defines where a lot of churches are today. Things ain't what they used to be, and probably never was. Oftentimes the memory of yesterday is brighter than it actually might have ever been. And so churches oftentimes find themselves there in a nostalgic way. Here are the final 3 stages when we talk about the life cycle of the church. It can be said this is really where the church begins to descend into an organizational hell. This is where bad things can begin to occur as far as the life of a church. This is the seventh stage, the seventh step. Questioning. It marks the point of no return for the congregation, organizationally speaking. This questioning is the now or never point of the congregational health. Health or death are the choices. Questioning actually is a good thing because it can help us in the redefining of who we are, refocusing on our core values, making sure that we remember our vision, and making sure our structure, our foundation is all set upon the mission which God has called us to accomplish. So questioning isn't a bad thing, but oftentimes churches, when they begin to question, they're comfortable. So they just stay where they're at in the nostalgic area, and the nostalgia leads them, after they question, if they'd rather stay nostalgic, then that leads them into a point where they really get to number 8. It's the polarization. It creates an organizational climate in which members make one another, mistake one another for the enemy, and then they fall into conflict. As energies will tend to focus on conflict rather than ministry, and then people stop being saved. The church stops its ministry. The church stops reaching out, and this is where there's oftentimes bickering and fighting and just people in general being upset with each other in the body itself. This could lead to dropouts. The 9th stage result when the dream of the effective ministry in this organization dies and members retreat into inactivity. Conflict is now open, and it's growing pretty nasty. Now here's just some quick truths, and we're going to look at this life cycle and the way others have defined it since this one. It's how to avoid the eventual death of a congregation. Well, one, we obviously have to remember, return to the dreams and the aspirations of the founder, Jesus Christ. 2, allow each member to play a part in building the dream. And 3, leadership who is committed to the dream. For you in this mentoring section, I want you to really talk about the life stages, the life cycle, the stages with your mentor. But then I want you to spend more time on this right here and how to avoid that, and really pray with your mentor and defining what your core values are, and defining who you are supposed to be as a church, and return to that dream and the aspirations of the founder, and then allow each member to play a part. What are some ways you can have in a conversation with your mentor? What are ways that you can together maybe allow the church to be a part of rebuilding that dream upon the foundation which is already set, and then talk about what does it mean to be committed to the dream. Really quick, just belief. The belief system must be established upon the Word of God. Obviously, goals must seek the lost and equip the saints for the work of the ministry. We're going to look at a couple of other ways that this is played out. Final thoughts here. No church is healthy without a defined kingdom dream. Each church must have that dream and continue to redefine that dream and refocus on that dream. Congregations either redefine their basic purpose every generation or they die. That's a powerful statement. That if a church doesn't take the time to redefine its purpose, or to clarify, to refocus on its purpose in every generation, then the church is going to be in the process of dying. The gospel of Christ's kingdom really hasn't changed, but what we must do is we must dream it again, and how that affects the church, and how the church is going to be a part of changing the community around it. Here's the life cycle looked at in other ways. George Bullard, just very quickly, you can kind of see here. I'm going to put my mouse here on the screen. You can kind of follow along here. It says, this is the growth. When you see here the vision, the relationships, the programs, the management, as at the birth of a church. This is phase 1, obviously early growth. The vision is strong. That's what is driving a church. There's a vision. You begin to develop leadership and really begin to write out and to determine your purpose, your core values. Infancy, you take that vision, you begin to build relationships. That's why you see this capital letter, the V and the R. Experiences, you focus on discipleship. As you begin to grow, childhood, vision is still oftentimes strong. Relationships, maybe not, it doesn't necessarily die, but it's the focus then becomes developing those programs. And so sometimes relationships can be slightly diminished. Adolescence, adulthood, let's just jump up here to adulthood. Adulthood is the church where it really needs to be. Obviously, all caps here. Vision is strong, relationships is a priority, programs are a wonderful thing. It's not what defines the church, but the purpose of the church helps focus its programs and its events and its ministries. And then the management, accountability, systems, resources. This is where a church wants to be. Now, if you begin to tip the scale here on this curve, understand this cycle that's defined here. Maturity is still a great place where a church needs to be. This is where a church might need to, the vision that birthed the church and brought it from growth to the prime place. The vision, sometimes this is where you need to redefine that vision, refocus that vision. This is not a bad place. And so, but the question is, where are you going to go from here? This is a redevelopment stage. A good place to be is so long as the church redevelops and redefines itself. Unfortunately, many churches don't do that, and this is where we talked about earlier, the nostalgia. This is where it sets in and you begin to drop off. So I'll let you kind of walk through these. You can see in the end where death, where management and accountability, even that's weak, and it's just the church is just continuing on. The church is dying at that point. The life cycle of the church, this is that one played out. Just you can kind of follow it along. I'm going to just scroll through this quickly. Birth, infancy, childhood, adolescence, adulthood. Again, a good adulthood and maturity, that's where you want to be, but you want to make sure that at that point you begin to redefine yourself and refocus yourself, reprioritize yourself. If not, you start to drop off from the empty nest to, you see, down to the point where eventually the church will die. Other renderings of the life cycle of the church, quickly here, Steve Mills basically walks through the same life cycle that was developed earlier, but it's the infant stage, the growing stage, the prime stage, the aging stage, and the dying stage. The prime stage is where a church wants to be. It begins to age. Again, that's not necessarily a bad place, but is the church in its maturity going to redefine itself and reprioritize itself? Frank Walton, he's basically said the same thing, shortened the life cycle of the church to the risk-taking, the caretaking, and then the undertaking. Again, what I want you to do is I want you to think about, with your mentor, just ways that you can just assess where you are, where your church is, and have your mentor really talk about what it means to refocus and reprioritize. Here's the life cycle of the church just summarized. You go from the birth to the incline to the recline, you're up at the top, and then whenever you have more memories than vision, then the church begins to decline. So the point where we need to be as the church is to refocus on our vision and see where the church needs to do before it drops off in the typical life cycle of a church. I hope that you'll just take a moment just to really pray about where your church is and where God wants it to be, and see how your church can come alongside of you and your mentor, the leadership in the church. See how the church can help define amongst itself where they want to be, refocusing on the vision and refocusing on the mission statement, refocusing on what I and my churches in the past have what we have called our core values, and making sure everything that we do fits in with a core value, which really, if we accomplished our core values, it helped us to accomplish our purpose and our mission. I hope that you'll take a moment just to assess where you're at, where your church is at in this typical life cycle of the church, and pray that the Lord would give you and your church just a new vision, a new passion to be able to reach the lost and to disciple the saved, all for His glory. God bless.